What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. It took a penalty shootout, drama, uncertainty, intrigue, but the U.S. men's national team is through to the semifinals of the Gold Cup. I'm going to start with some of the big picture implications of this win and then kind of get into the game itself through the lens of the bigger picture of what happened here. Because the story of this game and of Sunday's games generally is the way that this all played out and the incredible fortune the U.S. men's national team had. That is not necessarily about this game in particular, because they dominated possessions, they dominated shots. It took John Tolkien missing a potential winning penalty to even get to a point where you had shootout taker number 6, and then Matt Freese made another save, and the U.S. got the job done the second time. It took a careless, sloppy tackle from Max Arfston to give Costa Rica the lead. It took Malik Tillman missing a penalty to even get this game to extra time, because there is an alternate world where the U.S. loses in the shootout and it just snowballs into and builds off of all of the frustrations, the questions, the concerns that have been facing this team that have only gotten bigger this week and this weekend with the report that Mauricio Pochettino interviewed for the Brentford job. He denied it. It's kind of a he said situation at this point, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. Wanted to at least acknowledge it's a thing that's out there. It was part of the context for this game. Right, but this easily could have been a shootout loss. This easily could have been a 3-1 win, because I really think if Malik Tillman converts that penalty, U.S. has all the confidence. They get those goals in the second half. You're up 2. The game's probably done. It could have been a comfortable win. It's not like the performance was terrible, and also, they could easily be sitting at home right now. Both of those things are true. So you combine the fact that they got away with some of those mistakes. They were given the opportunity to make up for some of that, whether it was Max Arfston actually getting in and contributing on the offensive end, whether it was the fact that they got another save from Matt Freese to get that second opportunity to win and actually put the ball in the back of the net in the shootout, all of those things. And the fact that Canada lost. And so now you're playing Guatemala for a spot in the final, when it looked like you were going to have to go through Canada and Mexico to win this tournament. Now you got a less dangerous, less imposing, and depleted even in its current state Costa Rica team that, yes, the U.S. should have done better with, and no, this game should not have gone to a shootout. That is also true. But you get that, and then you get Guatemala, and then hypothetically, based on odds, you get Mexico, which certainly no guarantee, as we just saw with what happened with Canada here. And so that's really where I'm coming from on this, is you have this incredible opportunity now, because you got a really difficult CONCACAF, right, tense tournament game, the kind of stuff you want before the World Cup that you are not going to get after this tournament. You got one of those. You got to see a different set of players perform under those circumstances and, in many cases, deliver and respond to adversity, something this group has been criticized for. You got all of it without actually exiting the tournament. And now you are in a really good position to win this tournament, whether you should be or not. That question is now irrelevant. They are here, they won this game, they got the job done. That is really all that matters. It's not like it was a terrific, outstanding performance where they blew you away. It's not like it was a disastrous performance where you don't know how in the world they won this game. They were the better team. The better team typically wins, and oftentimes the better team loses relative to likelihood that it should happen, right? Sometimes a better team wins, sometimes a better team loses. But you get to keep going. And you're looking around here, and it's not like everybody else is winning all these games 5-0, and that struggling against a team that still has a Francisco Calvo out there, that still has a Keylor Navasson, that is just not the worst thing in the world, even if it should hypothetically on paper be better. That's just not how it works in the sport, and that is not how it works in CONCACAF. There are years and years and years of data to prove that point. Winning these games is difficult, no matter what the talent discrepancy, the experience discrepancy, whatever it is. No matter what the situation, winning these games is difficult. The U.S. found a way to do it. Now, the other interesting developments out of this game, Malik Tillman, not quite as impressive. It's great he's doing this against weaker CONCACAF opposition. He needs to be able to do it next summer at the World Cup, which means he needs to be able to do it against Turkey, Switzerland, Costa Rica, Mexico, Canada, etc. You know he's capable. He's doing it in the Eredivisie. He's doing it in the Champions League. But for whatever reason, he hasn't put consistent performances together for the U.S. And he's been really good this tournament. But now you're playing better teams, and he did not necessarily rise to the occasion. Obviously, missed the penalty. It was good to see the other Diego Lunas, Patrick Agyemang's getting involved in the attack, even though they weren't necessarily the headliners in this game. Arston was just involved in everything, good and bad. And Freeze obviously stole the show at the end, which to me is the biggest one. It was you want to see more from Malik Tillman in a game like this. You want to see him continue to play at the level he had been playing. Didn't necessarily get that. And the goalkeeper position. Because I said coming out of the Haiti game, I'm just not sure, after a mistake like that, Matt Freese is going to be able to play himself past Zach Steffen and Patrick Schulte, let alone Matt Turner. But what has happened since then? The club that Turner was supposedly getting sold to is currently in League 2 with no money. So who knows whether that actually happens or not, or where he ends up. There's a huge question mark there that a couple weeks ago seemed like it was a matter of time before he was officially unveiled as Lyon, and you have to assume if he's going there, he's going to be the starter, and that they're going to get the whole situation with Lucas Perry figured out, and that he's going to start. Now you don't know any of that. And Matt Freese goes and has this game and has that penalty shootout where he was spectacular. The U.S. loses this shootout with a lesser performance from the goalkeeper. That is just the truth. And, by the way, beating Keylor Navas in a penalty shootout, no matter what Keylor Navas' age is a pretty cool accomplishment to put on your career resume if you're Matt Freese. He got this opportunity, and this was the big question is, okay, against better opposition, similar to Tillman, what does he have? Is he going to make another mistake? Is he just kind of getting to go through the motions because the Trinidad and Tobago's and Haitis of the world, Saudi Arabia's of the world aren't really challenging him, right? It's not like he has done anything super impressive up to this point. His signature moment was the mistake. Now his signature moment is that penalty shootout. How much does it actually matter? How much does Mauricio Pochettino care? Hard to tell at this moment. We're probably going to find out when those next camps and that next roster is unveiled after this tournament, when everybody is back in contention, when all the MLS guys are getting to the end of the regular season, looking toward the postseason, when all the guys in Europe are back, when Matt Turner's situation is figured out, whatever that's going to look like. We're going to know if he's playing, theoretically, if he's at least starting the first few games of the season for whatever his club is, or if he's back in MLS. If that's what has to happen here, we're going to learn a lot based on that roster and how Pochettino feels about things. But you have to feel differently about Matt Freese's chances after this game than you did after the last one. It said something that Pochettino went back to him in a knockout game. He could have just gone to Turner. He didn't. And now Matt Freese has something to build his U.S. men's national team case on. And in a position where nobody else is taking it, he's the one that showed up. He's the one that's getting to play. He's the one that delivered. And it really seems like that goes a long way with Mauricio Pochettino. So he is the big winner. The U.S. overall winners. Now the question is, can you take advantage of this really good opportunity that you've been given? I will go back to what I said at the beginning. The way that this tournament has been treated, the way people have been talking, everything that's gone on. The message has been, this doesn't really matter in terms of the preparation for the World Cup and from the players that we don't really care about this. If you want to change the trajectory and the vibe and the mood around this team and the fan base and how the fan base feels about this team heading into next summer, there is one way to potentially do that, and that is to win this tournament. Even when everybody is communicating, it doesn't really matter. I think that is the fundamental frustration. I've talked about this. That the fan base, the people who follow this team and care about this team are going, why doesn't it matter? It matters to us. It is the last time we have to see this team, to make an impression before it's all on the line in the World Cup at home. This team was not in a good place entering the tournament, entering the camp before the tournament, and then you lost a couple games before the tournament. Go take advantage of the fact that you don't have to play Canada. Get the job done. Get to the final. See who it is. And if they can win that final, now you at least have to have a little bit of a different conversation surrounding this team. There is something to feel good about and something to build upon heading into next summer. That matters. It's not what it could have been, but there is an opportunity here that the U.S. came very, very close to not getting, and this being a disaster and just a continuation and a further entrenchment of all of the complaints and the frustrations and the issues that this team has been facing, and pretending like or acting like is not something that needs to be addressed here. Because that's what you're saying when you don't bring your best players and when you treat this tournament the way the U.S. Soccer's treated it. They got away with it. Better or worse, whether it was fair or not, they were fortunate in a lot of aspects. They also played pretty well. Now, what do they do with this gift that they have been handed in terms of a path, the opportunity to play in the semifinals and the path to the final? One other thing I wanted to mention here quickly on the Club World Cup. As the knockout stage began, PSG smashed Inter Miami. There's the end of MLS's participation in the tournament. That is part of the bigger story here, which is the way that this broke down in terms of the matchups for round of 16. You knew you were going to get at least 2 European clubs because you had 2 UEFA versus UEFA games. Everybody else, with the exception of one Brazil versus Brazil game, was UEFA versus somebody else. And 3 UEFA games have been played. One of them was Chelsea Benfica. So that's UEFA. That's the UEFA versus UEFA game. Took a extra time, weather delay, whole weird thing, but eventually Chelsea won 4-1. PSG 4, Inter Miami 0. Bayern Munich scores 4. You already have 3 European teams in. there is a very good chance you end up with 7. And all of a sudden, unless there is some upset, Monterrey could take out Dortmund. It's possible. Everybody does have to go play these games and win. You're getting at least one more team because Real Madrid's going to play Juventus. So you were guaranteed 2. You're already up to at least 4. But if it's 7, as it should be and you would expect it to be, this looks a lot like the Champions League quarterfinals. Bayern PSG. Borussia Dortmund, we'll just say Real Madrid win. Inter Manchester City. Yes, you do have one team in there because you had the Brazil game. But this looks an awful lot like and feels like the Champions League quarterfinals. The problem is, it's not the Champions League quarterfinals because these teams are exhausted. It is a condensed version of the tournament. It is a less interesting version of the tournament. It is a less aesthetically pleasing version of the tournament. It is a less glamorous version of the tournament. If this is going to succeed and become what Gianni Infantino wants it to become, it cannot be a bunch of European clubs playing a bunch of European clubs at the end of their seasons when they're exhausted. Those fan bases are the ones that care the least because they see this all the time. Real Madrid playing Juventus is nothing new to anybody. And those teams are not going to shift their focus to a tournament in the summer and start sacrificing the Champions League that they play in all season long. What makes this interesting and what has brought the intrigue so far and made this a fairly successful first edition and actually gotten people somewhat invested is the fact that you had such a good performance from the Brazilian teams and a good start from the Argentinian teams until it ended in spectacular failure. But that these games were interesting and the European teams didn't win all of them. They were getting beat by Brazilian teams. Now it looks like they were just kind of taking it easy, trying to get through the group stage, making sure they did what they had to do, and we're going to really start locking in the knockout stage, when you get to a point where you can actually really worry about winning the competition. That's a very logical thing to think about when this is not a top priority. Maybe this all changes and we get a couple upsets and the story is different. But if you have a quarterfinal that's 7 of 8 teams from UEFA, some of the biggest clubs in the world, and a semifinal that is 4 of the biggest clubs from UEFA, and a final that is, we'll just say, Manchester City, Real Madrid. To me, that is how you run this tournament into the ground pretty quickly and ensure it is a second-tier competition to the Champions League. That's the way I'll put it. Which is what I think a lot of people, including myself, view it, but that's not what Gianni Infantino wants it to be. Unless somebody is going to actually go on, and maybe this is just one example, and it's an abnormal one, and down the line, we see more drama and competitiveness in the knockout stage of this tournament. We might see it when the rest of these games are played. But that's what I came out of this weekend thinking about as you saw these European powers do exactly what you expected them to do. And what they had not generally been doing in this tournament with the exception of Manchester City. Manchester City had been bulldozing people. But you had some slip-ups from some other teams. PSG look like they're back in business now. You couldn't say that in the group stage. And understandably so. But that is what separates this tournament. It cannot just be a repeat of what you see in the Champions League. There's got to be something different that separates it. And it looked like we had it. Based on the group stage, you felt like I could see somebody making a run. This could actually be interesting. Let's see what happens when we get 4 Brazilian teams and they get to go play against European competition. They didn't get that chance exactly because 2 of them ended up playing each other. But now it just feels like I don't see any way in which, or it's incredibly unlikely, somebody's going to make a run here and actually break up this monopoly. In which case, the question that becomes, what are we doing this for? The answer, of course, is money. But outside of that, why should anybody care? Why should fans of European clubs care about this? That's the problem that seems to be presenting itself based on the, again, admittedly, small sample size. But that's the question that you have to be asking coming out of this weekend if this continues and this trend continues and it goes the way it's looking like it's going to. That is all for this edition of the Weekend Roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.